Chata Adonai Oseh Hashalom.
So friends, we come to the teaching for this Kol Nidre Yom Kippur evening. The hibernation of the coronavirus has provided a lot of time for reading. I spent a few of the early weeks of summer with Bruce Springsteen's autobiography. Much of it deals with his difficult relationship with his father, the turmoil that drove them apart, and the reconciliation that was able to emerge. Towards the end of his book, Springsteen casts his matured relationship with his father in an evocative image of ghosts and ancestors. And he says the following: "You work to turn the ghosts that haunt you into ancestors who accompany you. That takes hard work and a lot of love. But it is the way we lessen the burdens our children have to carry. And so I work to be an ancestor." Ghosts are the haunting presences in our lives of those with whom we had or have disrupted and difficult relationships that resonate in harmful and hurtful ways. Ancestors, on the other hand, are the presences with whom we have managed to reconcile, whether in life or in memory, the people we welcome to keep us company as we journey on. Yom Kippur is a day populated by ghosts and by ancestors. Consider the cast of characters. Azazel, the demon of the desert, to whom ancient Israelites imagined they could dispatch their collective sins by magically transferring them to a sacrificial goat. Or Aaron, the brother of Moses, the first high priest, who had to preside over the first ever Yom Kippur, haunted by the death of his two sons, Nadav and Avihu. There are the rabbis of the Mishnah, who lovingly outlined in precise detail every step of the ancient temple service for Yom Kippur in the generations that were haunted by the destruction of the Second Temple. Their words are preserved in the Yom Kippur Avodah service. And there are the teachers of Torah who were subjected to cruel deaths at the hands of the Roman Empire during the 2nd century of the Common Era. Their stories are preserved in the martyrology service of Yom Kippur. And there are the Jews for whom Kol Nidre may have atoned for any religious disloyalty into which they had been coerced, while they struggled to retain privately their ancestral faith. And of course, most personally and most profoundly, there are those we remember during the Yizkor service on Yom Kippur. So I had my own visit from ghosts and ancestors this summer when I encountered an unexpected medical moment. In early May, while out for a walk, I noticed that I was becoming short of breath while walking uphill. I assumed this was my body's way of saying that a little more regular exercise would not hurt. But when I noticed the same thing the next day and then the day after that, it seemed wise to report to my doctor. The next step was a cardiac stress test where you walk the treadmill while all kinds of wires connect you to all kinds of monitors. That test led to a cardiac CAT scan, which confirmed what I and the cardiologist had anticipated, that there was in fact a blockage in a major heart artery. So I have to tell you, I have not done so badly on so many tests since 11th grade algebra. So in early August, I found myself at the hospital undergoing a coronary angioplasty and having a stent placed in an artery that was in fact significantly blocked. Everything went well, and it's been a steady pathway towards a healthy recovery, for which we're grateful. As I was resting in the recovery room, I found myself thinking again of ghosts and of ancestors. Because of the several standard indicators for developing coronary heart disease, the singular one that I have been tracking through my adult life is the one that is called family history. My paternal grandfather, whom I never met, died of a heart attack at age 51. My father had a similar experience at the age of 44. If biology was indeed destiny, being the third generation of this lineage, that was a haunting that was hard to evade and impossible to avoid. I had long imagined the moment when the family ghosts would catch up with me. I was surprised, therefore, to find that upon learning of my diagnosis, that I no longer felt haunted. The ghosts seemed to disappear. In a curiously comforting way, it seemed as if the ancestors had arrived to take their place. My grandfather and my father, as it were, had come to pay a visit, to be present, to have a family reunion of an unusual kind. I could appreciate that they would accompany me through this process without being haunted by the fears of accepting our family legacy. Our three generations were now united in a way that we never had the chance to experience in real time. And together we could, at least in my imagination, hope that this time the outcome of our shared experience would be different. Yom Kippur, with its focus on deep interior spiritual work, reminds us that inevitably and universally, each of us has a heart that has been hurt. Sometimes that hurt is inherited, and it lingers and it haunts us. It leaves a legacy we did not ask for, but with which we have to live. It may leave us vulnerable and exposed, and it often leaves us fearful, constricted, and compromised. And sometimes that hurt in the heart, it's self-inflicted, a consequence of circumstance, of choice, perhaps of confusion. We may try to rationalize or to minimize what we regret, or displace responsibility for decisions that diminished us, but our mistakes and our sins remain our own. At the core of Yom Kippur is the affirmation that regardless of how the heart has been hurt or has been harmed, there can be atonement for what has gone wrong. And that where there has been hurting and harming, there can also potentially be healing. Such healing is difficult and challenging work. It involves apology and forgiveness and repair. It inevitably requires a willingness to be vulnerable. And as any responsible cardiologist or clergy person will tell you, it always involves a degree of risk. And when the healing of the heart that we seek involves a negotiation with our ghosts and with our ancestors, we are seeking to go beyond the repairing of a relationship. We seek to transform the legacy of that relationship. So how do we accomplish this kind of transformation? Our liturgy includes 3 petitions about the heart. V'tarher libenu, purify our hearts. V'yached levavenu, unify our hearts. And v'dabek libenu, attach our hearts. V'tarher libenu, purifying our hearts, is the first step on the path of transformation. An analogy to an activity with which many of us have become way too familiar during this season of pandemic, This is a bit like cleaning out the closet, or the attic, or the basement. You discover things you had forgotten, and despite having kept them for so long, you can no longer think of a good reason to hold on to them. Things like resentments and grudges, or the aggravation and the anger that require a regular replenishment of energy to sustain. We can choose to let those go. V'yached levavenu, unifying our hearts, that's the second step on the path to transformation of ghosts into ancestors. One midrash suggests that the doubling of the Hebrew letter vet in the Hebrew word levav, which means heart, refers to the two inclinations embedded in each of us, the Yetzer Hara, or the evil inclination, and the Yetzer Tov, the inclination towards the good and the decent and the dignified. Unifying our hearts does not mean banishing or subordinating one impulse or the other, but rather establishing equanimity between them and perspective about them. Transforming a relationship does not mean forgetting, but choosing instead to unify. V'dabek libenu, attaching our hearts, that's the last step in the path of transforming relationships. It helps to transform the ghosts that haunt us into the ancestors that can accompany us. In rocky relationships, we understandably may choose to, or may need to, make an effort to detach from other people in our family lineage. But especially when those relationships are intergenerational, every conscious effort to detach always ends up being a reminder that we remain connected. It is our choice whether we find a way to affirm those connections and find a way to walk along with our ancestors. The heart is the place where, for the sake of those who came before us and for our own sake, our ghosts become our ancestors, the presences that can accompany us. And the heart is also the place where, for the sake of our children and those who come after us, we commit to becoming ancestors rather than ghosts, so that we may be able to accompany them for as long as we are given the opportunity to do so. When intention and affection and compassion come into alignment, the heart becomes the intangible place where the mystery of repair and reconciliation and redemption can be accomplished. Wish you Shana Tova and Gamar Chatima Tova.